what goes wrong if you're an investor in Russia. I was the largest foreign investor in Russia. I was expelled from the country. My offices were raided. They seized our documents, and then the documents were used to steal our companies and steal $230 million of taxes that we paid to the Russian government. My lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, exposed the crime, and he was subsequently arrested, tortured for 358 days, and killed in Russian police custody. And so what I tell anybody who's considering investing in Russia is that you don't just risk losing your money, you also risk losing your life.
And also there is a big public discussion and also inner discussion in the White House about lifting sanctions against Russian economy. On the other hand, European allies propose to lift sanctions against Russia only in case of full ceasefire deal and only at different stages, not just lifting all sanctions in one moment, but creating several stages during which sanctions should be lifted. And also, big question remains what should be and what would be with Russian frozen money in Europe. Do you believe that European countries would be happy to also, for example, allow Russia to buy Boeing planes using Russia's frozen assets, even if Donald Trump negotiates and if he reaches such deal with Vladimir Putin?
No, it's totally unacceptable. Russia has done $500 billion of damage to Ukraine. Russia needs to pay for it. And so it's obvious that the frozen Russian assets should be used either for the defense of Ukraine, if this war carries on, or for the reconstruction of Ukraine, if the war ends. But under no circumstances should that money be used to buy Boeing airplanes. And on top of that, there's a whole bunch of Boeing airplanes that the Russians confiscated from a bunch of Western leasing companies. And so before anyone even talks about buying more Russian Boeing planes, Russia should be returning those planes that they stole.
Let's also cover Donald Trump's tariffs and its influence on the global economy. How do you see the influence of this global trade war between the US and China? And do you believe that this decision was right to impose tariffs than to change, to recalculate the main effectiveness and the main consequences of this decision? It seems like Donald Trump has changed his mind and made some exemptions from, for example, electronic goods from China shipping to US. What is your take on the current stage of global trade war between the US and China?
Well, I think it's a total disaster for the US economy, for the US consumer, and also for the Chinese and for others as well. I mean, this is probably the single largest self-inflicted economic wound that anyone could ever have thought of. It's terrible. But there is one silver lining, which is that it's pushed the price of oil down. And as Russia's main commodity export is oil, these tariffs and all this consequence of these tariffs at least put Putin in a more tenuous position.
You just mentioned about the Russian oil. What kind of price for Russian oil would really decapitate Putin's economy, will destroy his regime?
I think if you have the price of oil in the low 40s, that's it. Putin's finished. 50s is hard. Where it is right now, it's not good. He really needs a lot higher oil prices to survive.
But don't you think that Russia has also another currency reserves inside Russia?
Russia is a very rich country because of all the money that's been accumulated over a period of time. And so Russia's not a heavily indebted country. There's not a lot of interest payments to make. And so we've seen lots of much worse countries economically survive for a very long time. And so I wouldn't in any way predict that Russia stops functioning, but I can say that Russia can't borrow money from the West at the moment. And Russia, if there's no oil money coming in, it's going to become a lot tighter, and they're going to have to make a lot of compromises that they didn't have to make before. And the those compromises would be helpful to Ukraine.
And do you believe that current economic situation in Russia try to also convince Vladimir Putin to at least stay in this game of negotiations, forces Putin to negotiate with Trump, to stay in this game, even if he doesn't want to stop the war?
I don't think anyone's forcing Putin to do anything. Putin makes his own decisions. He doesn't care about the effect it has on the economy. He doesn't care about the number of dead Russian soldiers. All he cares about is Vladimir Putin. He cares that he stays in power, which keeps him alive. That's his main objective. And I think that, all this stuff is not helpful to him, but at the end of the day, he's not going to go starving.
Thank you, Mr. Browder, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has declared so-called three-day ceasefire from May 8 to May 11. This decision was based on humanitarian consideration, according to Kremlin. How do you see the main reasons behind this Putin's so-called three-day ceasefire after previous 30 hours ceasefire?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably three things. Number one, he's trying to change the narrative because he could see that even President Trump was beginning to become more, put more pressure on the Russian side. So I think part of it's trying to change the narrative there. The second thing, of course, is that nobody on the planet believes that Russia would actually live up to any ceasefire. I mean, it's not likely unless they were forced to. And then the third thing, the real reason, I believe, is because they don't want Ukrainian drones landing on Red Square during their Victory Day celebration activities. I think that's the real reason they're hoping for a ceasefire during that period. I thought your prime minister or your foreign minister's response was correct when he said, why not 30 days? Why 3 days? And what are we waiting for? Why not start it right now? And because he knows that this is a Russian information operation.
At the same time, according to Financial Times, Russian dictator Putin told Steve Witkoff that he was ready to halt invasion of Ukraine and the current front lines on the ground. What is your assessment of this possibility of halting the war and negotiations which are in progress right now?
Well, I don't. First of all, I would trust President Zelensky and his team to know what is best for Ukraine and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I think what a ridiculous offer, and the fact that Mr. Witkoff even repeated it is also not very good. That, the big concession from Russia was that they would not take over all of Ukraine. I mean, what kind of a concession is that? So I think the Ukrainian government knows that Ukraine's soldiers are winning on the battlefield, on the ground. They stopped Russia, even without adequate help from the West. Russia cannot defeat Ukraine, and so I think Ukraine is in a position you can make demands about your sovereignty, about future security, but this is up to the Ukrainian government and the people. How much are they willing to continue doing this? But I think it's hard to imagine an outcome with Russia retaining big chunks of Ukraine, and that just be it. That there wouldn't be further actions.
And also, there was an interesting meeting in Vatican between U.S. President Donald Trump and President Zelensky. After this meeting, Donald Trump, for the first time, questioned Putin's willingness to end the war, threatening another sanctions against Russia. Quote, "It makes me think that maybe Putin doesn't want to stop the war. He is just taking me along and has to deal with differently banking sanctions." Do you have any kind of hope that this meeting in Vatican could change Trump's stance on Putin, Trump's policy on that?
Well, certainly President Zelensky deserves credit